I never meant to stay out this late. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving only a faint purple glow in the western sky. As I trudged along the overgrown path, fallen leaves crunching beneath my feet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It had started as a simple hike in the woods near my grandmother's old cabin. I'd come out here to clear my head, to escape the noise and bustle of the city for a while. But somewhere along the way, I'd taken a wrong turn. The familiar trails had given way to thick underbrush and gnarled, ancient-looking trees that seemed to loom over me. A chill wind rustled through the branches, carrying with it the musty scent of decay. I pulled my jacket tighter around myself, quickening my pace. Surely the cabin couldn't be far now. Yet with each step, the forest only seemed to grow denser, darker. That's when I heard a low, mournful howl that echoed through the trees. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Wolves? No, we didn't have wolves in these parts. At least, we weren't supposed to. Hello? I called out, my voice sounding small and frightened in the vast darkness. Is someone there? Only silence answered me. Then, a twig snapped somewhere to my left. I whirled around, peering into the gloom, but could see nothing but shadows. This isn't funny, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. If someone's out there, just show yourself. As if in response, a cold laugh drifted through the air. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard before, high and cruel, with an otherworldly quality that made my skin crawl. I ran. Branches whipped at my face as I crashed through the underbrush, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from whatever was out there. After what felt like hours, I burst into a small clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated old house, its windows dark and empty. Paint peeled from the weathered clapboards, and the porch sagged ominously. It wasn't my grandmother's cabin, but at that moment, any shelter seemed better than being out in the open. I stumbled up the creaking steps and tried the door. To my surprise, it swung open easily. Hello? I called out as I stepped inside. I'm sorry to intrude, but I'm lost. Is anyone home? The floorboards groaned beneath my feet as I made my way through what must have once been a grand entryway. Cobwebs hung from every corner, and a thick layer of dust covered every surface. It was clear no one had lived here for a very long time. A sudden gust of wind slammed the front door shut behind me. I jumped, my heart racing. It's just the wind, I muttered to myself. Get a grip. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, intending to use its flashlight, only to find the battery had died. Perfect. Just perfect. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I noticed a faint glimmer of light coming from upstairs. Hope surged through me. Maybe someone was home after all. I climbed the creaking staircase, following the dim glow. It led me to a room at the end of a long hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see flickering candlelight within. Hello? I called again, pushing the door open wider. I don't mean to disturb you, but I could really use some help. My voice trailed off as I took in the scene before me. The room was empty save for a single chair facing the far wall. Atop the chair sat an old, cracked mirror, and in that mirror, I saw myself. But not as I was now. The reflection showed me as an old woman, my face lined and withered, eyes sunken and lifeless. As I watched in horror, unable to look away, the reflection's mouth began to move, forming words I couldn't hear. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on something. I looked down to see a heavy, leather-bound book on the floor. It had fallen open to a page covered in strange symbols and diagrams. At the top, in faded script, were the words summoning the ageless ones. A board creaked behind me. I spun around to find the doorway filled with a towering, shadowy figure. It seemed to be made of living darkness, with 2 pinpricks of red light where its eyes should be. "Welcome, child," it said in a voice like rustling leaves. "We've been waiting for you." I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The shadow lunged forward, engulfing me in icy blackness. I felt myself falling. And then I was back in the forest. Moonlight filtered through the branches overhead, casting eerie shadows on the ground. Had it all been a dream? But no, my clothes were torn and dirty, and scratches covered my arms. In the distance, I could see lights. My grandmother's cabin? I started towards them, my legs shaky but determined. Whatever had happened in that house, I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to get back, had to warn someone. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The forest seemed different somehow, older and wilder. And when I glanced at my reflection in a puddle of rainwater, just for a moment, I thought I saw the face of that old woman staring back at me. I quickened my pace, pushing through the underbrush. The lights grew closer, but so did the sounds behind me, rustling leaves, snapping twigs, and always that high, cruel laughter. "It's not real," I told myself. "Just keep moving. You're almost there." But deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever had happened in that house, whatever I had awakened or unleashed, it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. As I broke through the tree lane, I saw not my grandmother's familiar cabin, but a small town I'd never seen before. The buildings looked old-fashioned, like something out of the early 1900s. People in outdated clothing stared at me as I stumbled down the main street. "What year is it?" I asked a startled-looking man. He gave me an odd look. "Why, it's 1922, of course. Are you feeling all right, miss?" I felt the blood drain from my face. 1922? How was that possible? I turned to look back at the forest, half expecting to see the shadowy figure pursuing me. Instead, I saw only trees and mist. A hand grabbed my shoulder, making me jump. It was an elderly woman, her face kind but worried. "You look like you've seen a ghost, dear," she said. "Why don't you come with me? We'll get you cleaned up and sorted out." I hesitated, unsure whether to trust her. But what choice did I have? I was lost in a time that wasn't my own, with no idea how to get back. As we walked towards her house, the old woman kept up a steady stream of chatter. You remind me of someone I used to know," she said. "A girl who disappeared in these woods many years ago. They never did find her, but some say her spirit still wanders on dark nights." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What was her name?" I asked, dreading the answer. The old woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Why, she had the same name as you, dear. Isn't that a funny coincidence?" I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding. "But I never told you my name," I whispered. Her smile widened, revealing teeth that were just a little too sharp. "Oh, didn't you?" she asked, her voice changing. becoming that familiar rustle of dry leaves. Well, never mind that now. You're home at last, and we have so much catching up to do. As her features began to shift and blur, I realized with horror that this was no kindly old woman. Whatever had followed me from that house in the woods had found me again. I turned to run, but the street behind me was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of dark forest. The townspeople had vanished, leaving only shadows and mist. "You can't escape, child," the thing that wasn't an old woman said. "You're part of our story now. And the night is long and full of terrors." I ran anyway, plunging into the misty woods. Branches scratched at my face and arms, roots seemed to reach up to trip me. "Don't be afraid," a soft voice said behind me. I whirled around to see a young girl standing at the edge of the trees. She wore an old-fashioned white dress, and her skin was so pale it seemed to glow in the darkness. "They're just like us," she continued, gesturing to the river. "Lost souls, trapped between worlds." "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What is this place?" The girl smiled sadly. "This is the in-between," she said. "A place where stories never end and nightmares come to life. I've been here for, well, I'm not sure how long anymore. Time works differently here." I shook my head, trying to make sense of it all. "But how did I get here? How do I get back?" "Back?" the girl laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, there's no going back." "Not really. Once you've entered the story, you become part of it. Forever." A twig snapped in the forest behind her, and the girl's eyes widened in fear. "They're coming," she whispered. "You have to run. Follow the river, it might lead you out. But whatever you do, don't look back." Before I could ask who was coming, she vanished, leaving behind only a faint shimmer in the air. In the distance, I could hear that familiar, rustling laughter getting closer. I turned and ran along the riverbank, my feet slipping on the wet stones. The voices in the water seemed to call out to me, begging me to join them, but I forced myself to keep going. The mist grew thicker, until I could barely see a few feet in front of me. Strange shapes moved in the fog. Were they trees, or something else? I didn't dare stop to find out. Just when I thought I couldn't run any further, I saw a light ahead. It flickered and danced, like a candle in a window. Hope surged through me. Maybe this was the way out. I burst through the mist and found myself standing in front of a small cottage. It looked warm and inviting, so different from the oppressive darkness of the forest. Without hesitation, I ran up to the door and knocked. "Hello?" I called out. "Please, I need help." The door creaked open, revealing a cozy interior lit by candlelight. An old rocking chair sat by the fireplace, and the walls were lined with bookshelves. It reminded me of my grandmother's cabin, and for a moment, I felt safe. But as I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me. The candles flickered, and in their dancing light, I saw the titles on the book spines: Nightmare Realm, Eternal Hauntings, The Price of Immortality. A chill ran down my spine as I realized my mistake. This wasn't an escape, it was a trap. "Welcome home, dear," a familiar voice said from the rocking chair. As it turned to face me, I saw not my grandmother, but the shadowy figure from the abandoned house. We have so many stories to tell, and all the time in the world to tell them. I backed away, reaching for the door, but my hand passed right through the knob. The walls of the cottage began to dissolve, revealing the dark forest beyond. "Now then," the shadow said, its red eyes gleaming. "Shall we begin?" As the last vestiges of the illusion faded away, I found myself once again in the heart of the nightmare forest. But this time, I wasn't alone. Shapes moved in the darkness around me, some familiar, others beyond description. I realized with growing horror that this was more than just a bad dream or a ghost story. Somehow, I had stumbled into a realm where every scary tale ever told was real, where the monsters under the bed and the things that go bump in the night roamed free. And now, it seemed, I was trapped here with them. The shadowy figure extended a hand towards me, its form shifting and changing. "Don't be afraid," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers. "After all, you're one of us now. And the night is young." As the shadowy figure's words echoed in my mind, I felt a surge of defiance. No, I wouldn't accept this fate. I couldn't. I turned and ran, plunging deeper into the dark forest. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers trying to snatch me. I could hear whispers on the wind, voices both familiar and alien, telling me to give up, to surrender to the darkness. But I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know how long I ran. Time seemed to lose all meaning in this nightmare realm. But eventually, I stumbled into a small clearing. In the center stood an ancient stone well, its edges worn smooth by countless years. Desperate for a moment's rest, I approached it, leaning against the cool stone. As I caught my breath, I noticed strange symbols carved into the well's rim. They seemed to shift and change as I looked at them, forming words in a language I shouldn't have been able to understand, yet somehow did. "Speak your deepest fear, and find your way home," I read aloud, my voice trembling. A soft laugh echoed from the depths of the well. "Clever child," a voice said, neither male nor female, young nor old. "But are you brave enough to face what lies within?" I peered into the well, but could see only inky blackness. "Who are you?" I asked. "I am the keeper of fears," the voice replied. "I have existed since the first human felt terror in the night. And I offer you a choice." "What choice?" I asked, wary but desperate for any chance of escape. "Face your greatest fear, here and now. Survive, and I will show you the way home. Fail, and you will join the countless souls trapped in this realm for eternity." I swallowed hard, considering the offer. "And if I refuse?" The laugh came again, darker this time. "Then you may run, little one. Run until your legs give out and your mind shatters. But know that in the end, the darkness will claim you all the same." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. What choice did I have? "All right," I said. "I'll do it." "Then speak your fear, child. Give it form and name." I thought back to all the terrors I'd faced since entering this nightmare world. But none of them compared to the deep, primal fear that had haunted me since childhood. "I'm afraid," I began, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm afraid of being alone. Truly, completely alone." As soon as the words left my lips, the world around me began to change. The forest melted away, replaced by an endless, featureless white void. I couldn't tell where the ground ended and the sky began. There was no sound, no smell, nothing but empty whiteness stretching in every direction. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding flat and lifeless in the void. There was no echo, no response. Just silence. I started walking, hoping to find some landmark, some sign of life. But no matter how far I went, nothing changed. The emptiness was absolute, suffocating. Hours passed, or maybe days. I had no way to tell. I screamed until my voice gave out, ran until my legs collapsed beneath me. But still, there was nothing. Despair began to set in. Was this to be my fate? Eternal solitude in this blank, empty world? I curled up on the featureless ground, tears streaming down my face. That's when I heard it. A voice, so faint I thought I might be imagining it. Don't give up. I raised my head, looking around wildly. Who's there? Remember who you are, the voice said, slightly louder now. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. I don't understand, I said, struggling to my feet. Please, help me. You're stronger than you know, another voice joined in, then another, and another. Soon, a chorus of voices surrounded me, encouraging me, reminding me of who I was and where I came from. I recognized them now, family, friends, even casual acquaintances. All the people who had touched my life in some way. As their voices grew stronger, the white void began to crack and crumble. You're not alone, they said in unison. You never were. With a sound like shattering glass, the void collapsed. I found myself back by the well, gasping for air as if I'd been underwater. Well done, the keeper's voice said, sounding impressed. Few have the strength to overcome their deepest fear. I had help, I replied, my voice hoarse. Did you? The keeper mused. Or perhaps you finally realized the truth that you carried that strength within you all along. Before I could respond, the well began to glow with a soft, warm light. The symbols on its rim rearranged themselves, forming a map. As promised, the way home, the keeper said. But remember, child, the journey through fear changes us all. You may find that home is not quite as you left it. I studied the map, committing it to memory. Thank you, I said. Do not thank me yet, the keeper warned. The path home is never easy, and you have attracted the attention of powerful forces in this realm. They will not let you go without a fight. As if on cue, I heard that familiar, rustling laughter in the distance. The shadows at the edge of the clearing began to deepen and move. Run, clever child, the keeper said, its voice fading. Run, and don't look back. I didn't need to be told twice. I took off in the direction the map had shown, my feet barely touching the ground as I sprinted through the forest. The sounds of pursuit grew louder behind me. Branches whipped at my face, roots seemed to reach up to trip me, but I kept going. The voices of my loved ones echoed in my mind, giving me strength. I burst out of the tree line and found myself at the edge of a cliff. Far below, I could see swirling mists and, just barely visible, the twinkling lights of what looked like my town. The shadowy figures emerged from the forest behind me, their red eyes gleaming with malice. End of the line, little one, the leader said, its form shifting constantly. There's nowhere left to run. I looked back at the cliff, then at the approaching shadows. The keeper's words echoed in my mind, the journey through fear changes us all. Taking a deep breath, I made my choice. I turned to face the shadows, standing tall. You're right, I said. I'm done running. The shadows hesitated, confused by my sudden change in demeanor. I'm not afraid of you anymore, I continued, my voice growing stronger. You only have power over me if I let you. And I choose not to. I took a step forward, and to my amazement, the shadows retreated. This is my story, I said. And I'm taking back control. With each word, I felt a surge of energy coursing through me. The shadows wailed and thrashed, but they couldn't approach. Go back to the darkness where you belong, I commanded. You have no place in my world. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, the shadows dissolved into mist. The oppressive atmosphere of the nightmare realm lifted, and I found myself standing on the edge of the woods near my grandmother's cabin. I blinked in the bright sunlight, hardly daring to believe it was over. Had it all been a dream? But the scratches on my arms and the leaves tangled in my hair told a different story. As I walked towards the cabin, I noticed things seemed different. Colors were brighter, sounds clearer. And there was a new confidence in my step. My grandmother was waiting on the porch, worry etched on her face. Where have you been? She asked as I approached. You've been gone for days. I was about to call search and rescue. I opened my mouth to explain, then hesitated. How could I possibly describe what I'd been through? It's a long story, Grandma, I said finally. But I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Well, you certainly look different. There's something in your eyes. You remind me of your great-grandmother. She always said she had quite an adventure in these woods when she was young. I raised an eyebrow at that, wondering just how many others had found their way into that nightmare realm over the years. How many had made it back? As we walked into the cabin together, I couldn't shake the feeling that my adventure wasn't over. The keeper had said I'd attracted the attention of powerful forces. And while I'd overcome my greatest fear, I knew there were always new challenges to face. But that was okay. Whatever came next, I was ready. After all, every good story needs a sequel. For now, though, I was content to be home, surrounded by the warmth and love of family. As I settled in by the fireplace, listening to my grandmother chat about local gossip, I smiled to myself. The night might be dark and full of terrors, but morning always comes. And with it, the strength to face whatever shadows might linger. I knew that somewhere out there, in the space between stories, the keeper of fears was watching. Waiting. Perhaps even proud of how far I'd come. Until next time, I whispered, too soft for anyone else to hear. And in the depths of the forest, just for a moment, I thought I heard a familiar laugh on the wind, not mocking this time, but almost approving. The end, for now.